I wanna go down every other road now. I don't wanna love nobody but you. So, hello, Reverend MeeLing, Reverend Susan MeeLing, Lady Dory Bell, Lady MeeLing, apparently Lady MeeLing in America, whatever. I've been known by a few names. I actually got those registered because I figure, well, I go by the names. I might as well have them as mine and be mine. Say, just have the name because it's not like I'm any different than who I am. It doesn't matter what name it is, I'm still me. There is this issue when it comes to that head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. I am incapable of being anybody other than myself. Like, I had done, what is it, that acting thing? I think that's what it's called, acting. And so there was this guy, I had answered an ad for, it was supposed to be called Guardian Assholes. And I was supposed to pretend to be a intergalactic psychologist or something like that. And so, we were given the premise. It was supposed to be very improv or impromptu. So it was one of those, okay, well, I mean, not a problem. I know some of the lingo. I've had some experience in certain regards. And so I didn't get to go to the viewing of it, though, until well after. And so I'm going to discuss a little bit of that in regards to, I didn't get contacted, I wasn't alerted or anything like that, and I had told the guy, Joey, that I have issues remembering to go online because of my head injury, explain some of that and all that sort of stuff. So it wound up being where the premise was, I don't know what the show got changed to as far as the name is concerned. So, but apparently it got pulled because he didn't label it correctly or something like that. And so in the show itself, again, I was supposed to be an intergalactic psychologist, and the aspects of it were preparing people for debates. And so I was supposed to have an English accent. I tried really, really hard. I listened to a bunch of different things, although I had several discussions with people over the years that were from England. So I was like, okay, well, I can try to get it as best as I could. I really did. I tried, and then since I could only listen to shows at the time, I was like, okay, well, if I listen to every episode of, I can't remember what it was, but it was one of those, I can pick up some of the more subtle nuances of the accents, despite not fully getting all of it, of course. And then because of the news stations that I listened to, I mean, they were television shows realistically, but listened. So like Varney and Company, I listened to him. I already liked the show to begin with. But I could pick up certain dialect aspects where it's like, okay, and so, not to offend anybody in England, I hope that I got it correct. And I know that there were a few times where I kind of slipped into a little bit of an Australian and a little bit of a Irish accent, though there is some connections in certain regards, so hopefully that wasn't too much of an issue. But yeah, we were in the show, we were supposed to get the guys that were getting ready for a debate, and just kind of militaristic humor with the guy who pretended to be the husband, sort of thing, and we went back and forth, and well, you know, I've heard worse. And in like seriousness than anything that guy said, I was like, yeah, well, you know, that's all you got. It's kind of difficult for certain aspects, so, but had a lot of fun doing it with the different actors of the show and stuff. And I got to, at one point in time in the show, there was a thing at a what was it? A boxer type of place. I think it's called a studio, but they taught like various different forms of fighting, and it's like, oh, that takes me back. That takes me back. I remember when I used to train in certain things, and then one of the guys that had owned the studio, it's like, I know that. Where are you from? And he said he was from Philadelphia or something. I was like, oh, what part? What part of Philly? I used to walk around there when I was growing up, and so, you know, discussed a few things. And then there was this security guard, and he was all like, you know, security guard like. And he and I discussed a few things, like, oh, what you got in your tool bag? I have some ideas for that. Just saying, you know. I mean, I'm not attacking. There's some ideas. But one of the aspects was the different galactic whatever had to do certain stuff that the guys that were being trained are doing. I was like, all right, well, I can. And so I was wearing corsets, and those were spiral steel boned corsets. The thinnest one was 6 millimeters. Yes, I was doing push-ups and all that sort of stuff in a skirt and a corset and heels. And realistically, it wasn't anything that I couldn't do before. So it was one of those like, oh, okay, just do some push-ups, all right. I'll go run in a corset. Oh, okay. All right, yeah, sure. Oh, you want me? And so then I wound up doing some of the filming, and it's like, yeah, I could do that. No problem. All my first time by technicalities for like a show aspect. And so, saying, and so I hadn't done that before in regards to a show, and so did then, apparently, yeah. I didn't really think much of it, because not saying in a negative way, just one of those, well, if it winds up being important, I'll be informed that it's important. Somebody will let me know. Somebody will tell me that, you know, it's a big deal or something like that. That's at least the way I viewed it. Or if it was, you know, a big deal or something like that. And so nobody told me. I didn't even find out about it until the viewing had already happened, until towards the end of 2018, and I was one of those, well, all right. And it's kind of weird because the male that lives in the apartment in 736 looks like one of the males that was outside of one of the bars with a video camera. I didn't sign on for so that was an attempted aspect to get me to be anybody other than myself, because we were discussing certain points of the show. The majority of that evening was about the show. There was not really much discussion of personal life. So, you know, would be a shame if that was an attempt to set certain things up, and yet it was about the show and not actual questions that were valid, because they were supposed to be about the show and not anything but the show. Because there wasn't discussions about private or personal life stuff that night. And then the boy in 725, the taller one, not the one who showed up actually at my door, with the kind of fluffier hair, had looked like a male that I had seen in Iowa during this one evening when I was coming out of the Blue Moose in Iowa City. Or I already had been outside of the Blue Moose, and I was going inside. I went up the stairs, and that particular male looked like he was coming out of it, and I was just one of those. And he ran. Just as he ran down the stairs, when I walked by him going up the stairs to the Blue Moose. When I saw him at the stairs, when I was coming up one side, as he was going up one side, he ran to 725 to hide. I assume, at least. I could be wrong. But yeah, I did not give permission in regards to my Medal of Honor art project for anything. I had discussed the possibilities of how it would be cool if, though that was not what I was told the premise of the show was. And I would not allow certain individuals to be a part of that. And again, at that bar in, I think it was the one near the railroad yard. I think, not Bothell. Maybe it was Bothell. Or maybe it was no, it wasn't Bremerton. It was above, well, maybe it was Bothell. It was in Washington State near Seattle. And the entire time at that bar, the only thing we discussed were aspects of the characters of the show, nothing in real life situations. So I didn't know if that was a situation that needed to be clarified, if that hypothetically was a setup, and if I'm not mistaken, legally you can't do that to someone. You have to actually, if you're going to ask questions in regards to an investigation, you have to let them know that they are being questioned in regards to an investigation, instead of being told, as I was, it was about the show, and only about the show. It was not for people to get to know one another. It was only about the characters of the show. So, I don't know if that's of importance for law enforcement. However, if hypothetically that was a setup that was illegal because of not actually saying what the questions were supposed to be about, but saying in a lying format that it was supposed to be about the show, but attempting to sneak certain other questions in, but under the guidelines of the characters of the show, then it's only about the characters of the show and not a personal life thing, because it wasn't brought up in that regard. So if that happened to be an issue, I just wanted to clarify that and make sure that was abundantly clear, that that particular everything had been about the show as far as I was informed. I was never informed of anything in regards to real life. And I think that there is a legal term for that illegal type of setup, which would essentially make whatever that particular term to be an illegal type of setup. Not extortion, but that would lead to an exoneration, because of every question having to do only with the characters of the show for Guardian Aspels, and not about real life stuff at all. If that was presented to law enforcement and told that the questions were about anything other than the characters of the show, then that would in turn mean those people lied to law enforcement, telling the law enforcement that it was anything other than about the characters of the show that was supposed to be called Guardian Assholes, but apparently wasn't. Which would lead to an exoneration and a few other things. So for example, let's say Matrix Renee and Jason, Renee's bitch, had decided they thought that they could be sneaky and go behind the government's back and attempt to do something like that because they didn't want to wait for the government to do their actual investigation and tried to falsify evidence. I think that that is a crime. I think that is considered illegal. Because, again, unless they gave all of the footage in full, not edited, to law enforcement, then, I mean, there are plenty of people who have seen things where videos are patched together, and that would be giving false statements to law enforcement, which if it's not a crime, I think it should be. But I have a feeling that's a crime to give false evidence to law enforcement for an investigation that was illegally done. Not forgetting, if I'm not mistaken, that actually would be under private investigation. And in Washington state, I mean, it is a Democratic state, which means it's not exactly like New Jersey, and not all of Washington state is like that. However, I think that there's a thing in Washington state that you cannot record someone without letting them know, unlike in the state of Texas, as long as the person consents to it being done in the state. And in a private home, that is considered illegal. And so if hypothetically that was a thing and it was under their personal pretense of doing an investigation, then I think that just because it was for the show, as I was told in regards to Guardian Assholes, I think that that would be an illegal way to attempt to circumvent getting a private investigator's license, and would make any attempted aspect of evidence considered null and void, not only for falsifying evidence and wrongly presenting a situation illegally, which is another set of laws, but then would add to stalking across state lines if it was Matrix Renee and Jason, among their associates. And so that would hypothetically mean stalking across state lines, illegal entrapment, because of giving the premise that it's going to be discussing a show and then illegally giving false evidence to law enforcement, which is another criminal charge. And then what else? Illegal surveillance in the state of Washington. I mean, especially near Seattle, I would guesstimate those laws are extremely strict when it comes to that sort of stuff. When it comes to surveillance, you have to have, a certain setup, and that would have to probably go under the guise of private investigation. And I would guesstimate, again, you would need a private investigator's license, which in turn would mean, again, another illegal aspect. So hypothetically, if that occurred, it would probably be safer in the long run for whoever would have hypothetically set up that situation to drop all investigation charges against me. Because if that was a hypothetical thing that occurred, then if law enforcement really wanted to, because of the amount of time and money and effort, well then all of those additional crimes plus going into other states in reference to my Medal of Honor art project crossing multiple state lines, whether through car or flying out to the state of Washington and then driving around, I'm fairly certain that that would also add to those stalking charges. And so probably be, if that hypothetically occurred in reference to Matrice Renee and Jason and or anybody else that had to do that, that's not actually a law enforcement official, I would guesstimate that it would be safer and in better faith legally for any possible criminal charges that beyond what I just labeled, it would be a better deal to drop that investigation and admit to wrongdoing to law enforcement. Because if, hypothetically, that's a thing, and that occurred as I saw it, the criminal charges that would be just mounted up. I don't know. I mean, that would be essentially prosecution for maximum penalties in every possible charge. Whereas if the investigation and attempted aspects were to be confessed to law enforcement, then the minimum penalties for criminal negligence would be easier to consider, especially when it comes to my Medal of Honor art project that nobody was invited to be a part of, with the exception of my son. And that was only 1 year. And it was for one trip, and it wasn't to actually do anything. So, because in order for that to occur, I would have to draw up my own contract to allow that. And I did not draw up any contract for that. Since my son, at that time in Montana, was a minor with that traffic issue in Montana after going to the Montana Vortex, which in turn would also mean stalking a minor, and those criminal charges. Probably would be a better and safer outcome for those criminal cherubim to contact whoever they started whatever with to inform them that they want to drop all investigation charges. Because I don't know what the criminal penalties are for pretending to be a private investigator in Washington State without a license and bonding. And then going from Washington State into Montana State, as well as Oregon State and Idaho State and Wyoming and Colorado and all those other states. I mean, I'm sure that there are federal private investigator licenses. However, I would guesstimate that was not set up by those individuals. And again, you can't ask leading questions in an investigation. They're supposed to be yes or no. If I'm not mistaken. I obviously haven't done that job, so I wouldn't know. Just throwing out that aspect of the hypotheticals, because then everybody that was in on it would be able to be prosecuted, with the exception of me and my son. And, you know, I'm sure that, as I was told, that Amazon was the one who ran the aspect of some things. It was a private contract with Amazon. So relinquishing Amazon from any liabilities from what the show individuals were doing. So those lawyers would not be a part of it to defend those crimes. And then there's the aspect of lying to Amazon and that company, and then breach of contract, all sorts of stuff like that. Probably would be best, if that's hypothetically a thing, for those individuals to contact whoever they had set up arrangements with without my personal consent. Otherwise, I would guesstimate, instead of minimum charges or even a reduction of charges, would be a maximum for every single charge possible. Especially when it comes to a Medal of Honor art project. I could be wrong. I didn't go to law school, but I'm fairly certain you cannot set up a situation like that for questioning, especially in Washington State, and do that sort of recording from the bushes without a private investigator license. And insurance, of course, because that's part of being licensed and bonded. So I'm going to end this particular broadcast, and I'm going to wish that that's not the case, but I'm going to wish and hope that if that is the case, those individuals will contact whoever they had set that sort of stuff up with to attempt to reduce their criminal penalties. Because, yeah. And then, you know, flying in the air, I don't know if that's considered CIA territory, even if it's over the United States of America, because of the airspace. So, something for some people to think about, that's all. You guys have a good one. Subscribe to my channel, Reverend MeeLing. Go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, and you guys have a good day.